We are excited to be able to host this Stronger Together town hall meeting with the NAACP. And what I want you to do is give yourself a round of applause for being here. Can you do that? One of the things I've been telling people is that here in our great city, Austin, Pasadena, that our secret weapon is unity. And so we are excited. I want to be the first to welcome you to this town hall. And I want to give a special thank you to our president of NAACP National, President Derek Johnson. Thank you for being here, sir. And to the whole team that's here tonight. Without any further ado, I want to get this started right away. On behalf of our church, Victory Bible Church, we thank you all for being here. I want to present to you now President Derek Johnson. Please receive him as he comes.
Good evening. When we see the tragedy of the fire on the news, and I'm one of the people, I have not really watched news since the elections, that's why. And I began to think about Hurricane Katrina. And for those of you who may have remembered that natural disaster some 15 years ago, some of us lived through it. And I recognize the urgency of the NAACP getting involved because immediately following Katrina, several things happened that I'm sure is taking place in this community. That the insurance company became more and more difficult to get in contact with. That people start showing up in the neighborhoods offering monies for your properties that you had never seen before. That there was a lot of information as it relates to FEMA that was inaccurate. That there was tons of people raising money for the community, and you look up and say, well, I'm in the community, I ain't seen a dime of the money being raised. But you could, now this one is off, that was a good one.
So you have to use.
I have to use this one too?
Yes, so people on the Zoom can use.
Okay. That others came up who were overnight experts to begin to give advice. All of those things created a level of chaos. And I was on the Mississippi side of Hurricane Katrina, and it was 3 times worse in New Orleans. And in New Orleans, it became even worse because it was an issue of people who had to leave and they never came back, still to this day. And we decided as an organization we wanted to do all we can to support this community because of the generational wealth that was created through home ownership, your ability to withstand this moment and come out stronger than ever, and to ensure you understood what you were entitled to, whether it was from FEMA, your insurance company, or what was legally required for you to access entities that are accountable for causing the fire. And so we decided to partner with a law firm because we knew predatory lawyers would be coming to this community, seeking to charge 40% of whatever you got, and all kinds of the bad stuff. And so that's why the NAACP National Office, we're here to help with that recovery. Plus, the Image Award show is filmed from here, and we could not come in next month doing a show celebrating it with all of what has taken place in this community. And so we are proud to partner with Singleton Shriver. We are pleased that we'll have staff on the ground working with FEMA so that you know what you're entitled to. And we are prepared to fight both insurance companies and the bank if they try to foreclose prematurely. So that's why we are here as an organization. I'm the national president of the NAACP, and we are structured where we have a state and a local. And I want to welcome Rick Canada, who is the president of the California Hawaii State Conference, who's also here to assist in this moment. Rick.
Thank you, President Johnson, and good evening. I wish I could be greeting you on behalf of the 57 branches of the California Hawaii State Conference at a different time. I wish it wasn't, when there was so much sadness and sorrow from what has happened. I'm sincerely troubled by what I've seen. I just want you to know that the California-Hawaii State Conference of the NAACP, we're going to do everything that we can legislatively with the state assembly, with the state senate, with the governor's office to ensure that we can get your homes rebuilt, we can do it quickly, and people can move back on the ground. That's a priority for us. I look out in the crowd and I see everybody that looks just like me. I'm going to tell you, we're not going to abandon communities of color. We're not going to abandon the African American community. We're going to stand there with you, and we're going to be fighting with you. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our new president. I'm going to tell you, it's a blessing to have this brother. I've had a chance to spend all day with him. But the president of the Pasadena branch, Brandon Lamar. Brandon.
This one. All right, we're gonna get this figured out. Hey family, how you doing? Hey family, how you doing? I'm from here, so we family, born and raised, and I ain't went nowhere yet. If you have been victimized from this fire, can you just stand? I think it's important for people to see. If you're not standing, just look around you. These are just families that's in this room. We have a long haul ahead of us. And thank you guys, I have made a commitment to our city. I have made a commitment to, especially to African Americans and marginalized communities in our city, that we will do everything within our power to make sure that we have all the resources that we need to make sure you rebuild here in Pasadena. I've said this before this morning, and I'm gonna say it again, Altadena is not for sale. So if you are here, if you're watching, and you think we're gonna allow you to come into our community and take what is ours for pennies on the dollar, it's not gonna happen. Our community's already been reaching out, people have already been reaching out to families since day one of the fire. They have no respect. But I'm telling you now that we're doing every single thing within our power to make sure that you have the ability to build here. At the end of the day, GoFundMe is not enough. For a lot of people, the insurance won't be enough. So we want to make sure that dollars come here, not only from a local level, a state level, but a national level, so that we can rebuild this community and make it better than ever. We literally had a meeting with our governor earlier today, and after our meeting, he went to sign a bill for $2.5 billion that will come down to our communities to make sure that we have the resources that we need. So I promise you, from a person that is here, from a person whose family is from Altadena, from a person that grandparents built their church in Altadena and went to school in Altadena, Edison Elementary where I went is gone. Elliott Middle School that I went to is gone. I will make sure that we do whatever we can to make sure we come back stronger than ever. God bless you. Thank you so much.
All right, good evening, everyone. Mike.
Here we go. Can you hear me now? All right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to transition over now into the town hall portion of this session this evening. As you heard from President Johnson, President Callender, and President Lamar, NAACP is in this with you all. And so one of our first speakers this evening will bring up Mr. Curtis Brown, Federal Coordinating Officer for FEMA, to talk about some of the work that FEMA is already coordinating here on the ground in the Pasadena area. Curtis.
My name is Curtis Brown, as mentioned. I'm the Federal Coordinating Officer to oversee the disaster deployed here January 9th. Been here since, and I'll be here probably for the next 50 weeks. Prior to deploying here, I deployed to Maui after their wildfires. That was the day after their wildfires, and I spent 50 weeks delivering FEMA programs to Maui. I'm not comparing Pasadena to Maui. I think the benefit of me deploying to Maui for 50 weeks, it gave me the insight to FEMA programs so I can deliver those programs more efficiently to you. I have 26 years in the fire service. I retired in 2023 as the operations chief of CAL FIRE, so I probably hiked every hill there is from the Oregon border to San Diego. I'm a native Temecula, so I live less than an hour and a half from here, so I'm here for you. Currently, at the JFO that we have here in Pasadena, we have over 500 FEMA staff deployed to deliver the programs to you. We have 6,000 agents at our call centers to answer your questions by calling 1-800-621-3362. I think most importantly to me, though, is we have disaster survivor assistance teams. And those are personnel that are designed to surge for events like this. So at a moment's notice, we can get up to 3 or 4 or more staff here to be able to meet you where you are, anytime, any place that's requested. And they'll be here tonight, I think in the room back there. They'll be here after the town hall to answer questions. And then they also have flyers with more of the information. I brought some notes with me because it's important for me, one, to get accurate information out to you, timely information out to you, and then provide you stats on some of the programs that we have, as well as the priorities that FEMA has in place now, which is first, delivering our individual assistance program to you, because it's important for us to ensure that you have stable housing. And then also the second priority is removing the hazardous household materials from your properties so that we can then remove the debris, which leads to you getting permits and rebuilding. I encourage no one to leave. Please don't leave, right? Just take it day by day and make a commitment to yourself to stay in your community. Let's see here. So today we have 106,000, over 106,000 folks that have registered for FEMA assistance. We've delivered $38.8 million to over 14,000 households. 4.3 of that is for housing assistance, repair, replacement, and rental assistance, and 34.4 million in other needs assistance. And 13.1 of that 34 million is for serious needs assistance, so that's at $770 that some of you may have gotten. We've been messaging, and you can tell by the numbers of our 106,000 that have registered to apply for FEMA assistance. There's 2 grants available, up to $43,600 each. The first grant is for other needs assistance. So those are things for like personal property, medical and dental, transportation, funeral costs, and miscellaneous items that may have been in your house. The second grant, up to $43,600, is for repair, replacement, lodging expenses, and reimbursement from other things. For rental assistance, it does not count. If you get FEMA rental assistance, it doesn't count towards your grant. So if you got the max grant, which there's not a lot of folks get the max grant, but you're able to. By getting FEMA rental assistance, it doesn't count towards that. So it's not deductible at $43,600 if you got $43,600 if you qualified for that grant. And the continued rental assistance is for up to 18 months, given in 3-month increments. So that first check will be for 2 months, go back to FEMA. If qualified, we'll give you a check for the next 3 months. And then that's up to 18 months. The state requested that FEMA activates its transitional sheltering program for displaced survivors. That program opened on January 14th. As of today, there's 1,678 households that have checked in.
to 146 hotels. That's 3,934 individuals. Majority of the occupied hotels are in LA County, followed by Orange County, San Bernardino, Ventura, and Kern County. FEMA's TSA program provides a temporary lodging to eligible survivors who are unable to return to their home due to the wildfires. Under this program, FEMA pays for the cost of room, taxes, and non-refundable pet fees directly to participating hotels. As I heard earlier, someone asked me about FEMA giving out vouchers for hotels. We don't give out vouchers for hotels. We contact you, offer that program to you, give you a number to check in at that hotel, and then that's how we lodge you there. So if there's a voucher that's given to you, most likely it's not from FEMA. Survivors are responsible for all other costs, including laundry, restaurant, room service, parking, telephone, and movie rentals. TSA may also be available for those who have with insurance for a limited time. So like I said before, if you don't need to request this type of assistance, we'll contact you. As mandatory evacuations lift, we'll start to see a decline in our TSA program because there are folks in the TSA program, choosing that program that were under a mandatory evacuation and obviously couldn't live in their house. And so with the evacuations lifted over the next couple of days, we'll start to see a decline in the TSA program. Applying for assistance. Every head of household applied for FEMA assistance. Not everyone that lives in that household. If you have, for instance, lived at 143 5th Street, and you were sublet a room out of there and you have a lease for that, you may also apply for FEMA assistance. We know that the letters received by FEMA can be confusing. That's why we've taken your feedback and we've applied clear language to those letters within the last week. And so as the letters start coming out, you'll see there's much more clear language. Insurance, as we get this question a lot. If you were affected by the fires and have insurance, you should contact your homeowner's insurance first, right? Because your homeowner's insurance most likely have a line item there where they'll provide you funds for sheltering. And so we can't pay you money to shelter if your insurance company covers it for you. So contact your insurance company first, utilize that money, then come back, register for FEMA after you contact your insurance company. When that money runs out, come back to FEMA and we'll be able to provide you assistance. Rumors and fraud. There's been a lot of rumors and scams after the disaster. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. We've activated an email, stop FEMA fraud at fema.dh.gov, or call 866-223-0814 to report fraud or scams. And we've also launched a webpage that you can reach at fema.gov, and then just search for rumors. Already mentioned vouchers. There was also a rumor about FEMA covering 100% of individual costs. What the president said was he covered 100% of firefighting costs and debris removal, which includes reimbursement and provisions of federal resources for the local government and not individuals, not 100% impacted survivors' cost. The rumor regarding the GoFundMe page, FEMA, when you register, we don't check to see if you have a GoFundMe page. But if it ever were known to FEMA that you had a GoFundMe page, for instance, we don't duplicate benefits. And so if you had a GoFundMe page regarding paying for a car that you lost in the fire, and then FEMA found out about it and gave you money to replace that car, that'd be considered a duplication of benefits. So don't be afraid to advocate or don't pull down your GoFundMe page. I'd move forward with that because we don't check the GoFundMe pages when you register. We have 2 disaster recovery centers open right now, one at UCLA Research Park West, and a mobile DRC at the Pasadena City College. And then as of yesterday, we're looking at it, we signed a lease on a new location, about a half mile from here, 25,000 square feet. I'm gonna have all those resources. If you've been to the Disaster Recovery Center, one of the 2 that's open now, you can imagine 25,000 square feet, you get more resources there. I think there'll be a little transition between DRC 1, 2, and 3 being open all at the same time, and then depending on if the local, county, state, or volunteer agencies can staff all 3, then we'll staff all 3. If not, then it looks like we have to triage whether or not to shut down number 2. That decision hasn't been made yet. As I said before, our primary responsibility now and our priority now is to get you stabilized and sheltered. The next priority is removing household hazardous materials. The state requested that FEMA remove all household hazardous materials from properties impacted by the fire. This is the first step in rebuilding your home. We've directed the U.S. EPA to do this and allocated an initial $175 million to get them started. They will initially assemble up to 60 field teams, which equates to about 500 personnel. Over the last week, they've been conducting full assessments to determine the scope and scale of the HHM removal. We expect to begin removing HHM for both fires starting on Monday the 22nd. So right now, over the last couple days, they've been clearing the staging areas where they take all that hazardous material from their home and the lithium-ion batteries. And like I said, they'll start removing, going on the properties on Monday, January 27th. And their mission truly is to reduce the threat of immediate hazards. The next step in the process is debris removal. The governor requested FEMA remove all and dispose of debris and hazard trees from private properties burned by the wildfires on the 16th of January. And we approved that request on the 18th. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been assigned, and we've allocated $550 million to that cause. The current estimate for the entire operation is estimated to be $2.5 billion for debris removal. All counties have opted in to the Army Corps removing the debris, and so you reach out to your local elected leaders and thank them for that effort, because I think they truly thought that by having the U.S. Army Corps remove the debris, it would expedite the permitting process for them. Okay, that's all I have. In closing, thank you guys for having FEMA here delivering factual information to you. Like I said earlier, it's important for me to be able to have staff here answer your questions. If you know of anyone that has or wants to host an event similar to this with impacted survivors, Brandon Munson standing there, he'll be here till the end. Reach out to Brandon and we'll get staff there for you anytime like we've done tonight. We also have flyers here, disaster survivor assistance team, and I'm sure questions in that room over there, or Brandon or Randy sitting over there. I'll be here to answer your questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Awesome. All right, we're going to transition this. So let's give it up for FEMA one more time. All that important information. We're going to transition over now into our legal piece here. And so we're going to invite up our Office of General Counsel, Jeanette McCarthy-Wallace, Anthony Ashton, Senior Associate of General Counsel, and Letitia Johnson, who's partner with Singleton Scriber, and then we'll move into the legal briefing for the evening.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jeanette McCarthy Wallace, and I have the honor of being the General Counsel for the NAACP. And to my immediate right is my colleague, Ebony Ashton, who is the Senior General Counsel for the NAACP. And in addition to Aubrey Connor, Vice President Aubrey Connor, we constitute the legal team for the Eaton Fire. Since 1909, the NAACP has been fighting for the rights of Black Americans. Through the involvement of the Office of General Counsel, we will do just that on behalf of those who have been significantly and detrimentally affected by these fires. The NAACP and Singleton Schreiber are partnering to advocate for justice on behalf of the victims of the devastating Eaton Fire and the burning of Altadena. This collaboration marks a significant step in addressing the tragic loss of life, property, and livelihoods. This collaboration will also focus on raising awareness of the disproportionate impacts of disasters like the Eaton Fire on underserved and vulnerable populations, emphasizing the urgent need for systematic change to prevent such tragedies in the future. Anthony?
Good evening. As the General Counsel's Office of the NAACP, we've been fighting for civil rights literally for more than 100 years. We are the oldest and largest civil rights organization in this country. Your rights are something that we're fighting for again now. And whereas when we filed Brown versus Board of Education, we're fighting for the rights of Black folks generally. With regard to what's going on now, we're fighting for the rights of folks individually. Someone asked, how did you end up partnering with Singleton Schreiber? And that's very simple. We, throughout our work with some of the best lawyers literally in the country. And that's every day, day in, day out, for fighting for civil rights. With regard to this action, we were charged with, by our president, find the best fire litigation firm that you can and partner with them. I will say this, and I'm allowed to say this because I can brag about them rather than them doing it themselves, but they have represented more fire victims than any other law firm in this country, and that's why we're working with them. Our goal is to make sure that each and every one of you that chooses to pursue litigation is made whole to the best of our ability. You can applaud, that's all right.
Mr. Johnson of Singleton Schreiber. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. My name is Letitia Johnson, and I am a partner at Singleton Schreiber. I run our Mississippi office and am in charge of expanding the Southeast region. I've been with Singleton Schreiber for about a year. And I remember when I first sat down with them and we talked about the values of the firm and, what they stood for. And I remember thinking, okay, we'll see. I can honestly tell you I'm so proud to be a member of Singleton Schreiber, as proud as I am to be a member of the NAACP, because they do put clients first, because they do put their values first, and they understand that you can do well and do good at the same time. Our managing partner, Jill Singleton, who I think is overall just a good human being, has represented thousands of property owners in suits against utility companies. And so I know you're here to hear him, so Jared.
Thank you very much. It really is an honor to be here. I want to thank all of you for coming out. And the other thing that I want to do whenever we do these talks, when we get started, I just want to say that, can everybody hear me back? I just want to say how sorry we are for your loss. If you're here, it means that either you or someone you love has suffered loss, and that is something that we take very seriously. As several people said, our goal here is to make sure that every one of our clients has the resources necessary to rebuild. There was a really unique community that was significantly damaged by this fire. And one of the things that I love about doing this kind of work, and we do a lot of different types of cases, we represent wrongful death, we represent traumatic brain injuries, just all kinds of things. But the thing that I really love about doing fire litigation is that when the clients come to us, oftentimes they're suffering, they're at one of the lowest points in their lives. But if we do our job correctly, then we are part of helping them overcome that, and we can see the transformation. Our part of that is small. All we're doing is getting you the resources. All of you are doing the hard work, but just seeing that and seeing communities come together is inspiring. And that's one of the things that I really love about this type of work, and that I really love about this opportunity. Because I think everyone heard President Lamar. He's from here, and he talked about how critical it is to rebuild this community. And what we're going to do is to make sure that all of you have the resources to do that. So, what I'd like to do is talk about the case in general, let you know the newest information we have, and then also answer questions. And one thing that I really encourage people to do is to shout out your questions. If you're reluctant to shout it out, just raise your hand, and we'll call on you. But the whole purpose of this is to give all of you the information that you need to make decisions. And we can't do that if it's just me talking. So anytime you have questions, please let us know. If you're thinking it, odds are your neighbor or somebody else is thinking it, and we can get that information out. So starting at the beginning, what we do is represent individuals in suits against utility companies that start these fires. I'm sure you've all heard about the possibility that Edison, Southern California Edison, is responsible. So let me talk a little bit about the issue of liability. Now, I want to be very clear. There has been no official determination of liability. Obviously, there hasn't been a trial. All we have to go on is the evidence available. So what we do is we look at these cases, and we look at a lot of different fires. For example, late last year, there were 2 significant fires in the Los Angeles and Ventura County areas that we looked at, and we determined that they were not caused by utility company, so we didn't go forward. We are only interested in going forward in these cases if it appears that there is a viable defendant, because otherwise we can't deliver what you need, and it would be pointless for us to go in and waste your time. So when we're looking at this, we're doing everything we can to determine whether or not the defendant is actually responsible. With Edison, I'm sure everyone has seen the videos online of the arcing. And what that shows is arcing coming from the lines and going down, looks like it hit something, and then hitting the ground. Now, that's obviously very strong evidence, but in this day and age, it's certainly possible to create, through AI, all kinds of images that look real but aren't. So the first thing we want to do is inspect the actual scene and see whether or not the evidence is consistent with what we're seeing in the videos. Took a little while, but this past weekend, our experts were able to go to the scene and investigate and inspect it. Now, these experts are retired arson investigators, and collectively, the 2 that we hire have investigated well over 1,000 fires. And this is all different kind of fires: utility, other types of human causes, whether it's arson, whether it's a campfire, fireworks, somebody throwing out a cigarette. You name it, we've seen it, and they've seen it and they've investigated it. And so, when you're looking at this, you're trying to do 2 things. Number 1, you want to rule out natural causes, and that we can do. There were no lightning events, there was nothing like that. And the second thing you're looking at is whether or not there's any other human cause. So one of the most common would be something like an individual starting a campfire. And unfortunately, in our community, there is a significant homeless and unhoused population, and there are often encampments in certain areas. And one of the narratives that Edison has pushed. In fact, we received a letter from them this morning talking about a homeless encampment near the start of the fire, is that this is actually caused by a homeless encampment. I don't know if some folks remember several years ago there was a skirball fire near the Getty Museum. That, in fact, was actually caused by a homeless encampment. So that's something that we take seriously, and we want to look at it, and we want to determine whether or not that is a plausible theory. Our investigators went, and they determined that there was no evidence of any type of an encampment within several hundred yards. The one that Edison is talking about is at least 300 yards away, and it actually appears that it could be a little bit farther. But there's no indication of any kind that any fire was started there and then burned over towards the tower. And if that would have occurred, if, for example, because certainly fire travels, we know that, so it would be possible for there to be a fire that spread. Now, that would not be consistent with what we've seen, because in the different footage that we've seen, there's an arcing event that comes from the line down to the ground. And something that starts down the hill and burns up is going to be very different. So we had our doubts, but when they went and inspected, they found absolutely no evidence to suggest that, number one, there was a fire, and number two, there was a fire that spread and moved 300 yards up the hill. So they ruled that out. They also ruled out other causes that are common, such as fireworks, things of that nature. The other thing that's very critical is that the arcing event that all of us have seen would have resulted in some specific damage to the tower. And when they inspected the tower, they found markings that were consistent with arcing, and that just means the fire coming down and hitting it on the tower. So you have, and I'm just summarizing the evidence for everyone, you have no natural occurring event like lightning. You have no indication of any human-caused event like a campfire, like fireworks, like a cigarette, anything like that. You have video, and not just one, but multiple, plus we have different witnesses who saw it and are all saying the same thing. And that shows light coming, fire coming from the actual line down and appearing to hit the tower. Then the inspection shows markings on the tower that are consistent with that event. So when you put all that together, what our inspectors told me is, look, this was either Edison's lines or it's a cause we've never seen before. So that's where we are right now, and we are pretty confident that Edison started it. Now, obviously, that's just our belief. Edison is denying it, as they have every right to do, and the process will go forward. So let me talk a little bit about that. We have filed 2 suits thus far. I'm sure you've seen a number of other attorneys have filed suits. And all of those suits are going to be consolidated together for pretrial purposes. The way that the process works is that while each of these suits is individual, hold it up higher. Good. Sorry, I didn't want to be too loud. While all of these suits are individual, there is it's either coordination or consolidation, depending upon a number of factors. In this case, it would be consolidation. But everything is consolidated in front of a single judge. And that judge will handle all of the pretrial matters. Now, the good thing about this case is that because it is in Los Angeles, the fire occurred in Los Angeles, and Southern California Edison is based in Los Angeles, it will be consolidated. That means that the process of bringing everything together in front of a single judge will be quicker, which will be very good for all of us, because Edison is not going to pay until they're forced to. And that's one question we get, which is, why is it necessary to bring these actions so quickly? Why not wait? The answer is simple. It's twofold. Number one, you want to be able to make sure that there is no destruction of evidence. Not suggesting that Edison would, but there is a TRO, temporary restraining order, that is now in place that prevents that from happening. So now we don't have to worry about that. Number two, we want to get this process started as quickly as possible, because in the cases we've handled, and we've handled a couple dozen of these large cases, including 5 different ones in LA County dealing with Edison, they only pay when they have to. It's not like once suits are filed, they say, okay, let's sit down and let's make these payments. What they are going to do is to drag this out as long as possible. And that's understandable. That's what defendants do, and that's the way our system works. What our job is to push it along so that we can get these cases resolved for you more quickly. So what we do is we try and get a trial date as quickly as possible. Now, most of these cases do not go to trial, but the key thing about the trial date is it forces the defendant, in this case Edison, to make a decision. Do they want to go to trial, or do they want to start fairly resolving these cases? And what's happened in every other case we've had with Edison, whether it's the Thomas fire in 2017, the Woolsey fire in 2018, Bobcat fire in 2020, or the Fairview fire in 2022, every single one of those, they initially denied responsibility, the case was filed, you went through the discovery process where we were able to prove that they were responsible, we got a trial date, and then at that point, they decided they wanted to resolve these cases. And so that's the way the process works. Now, here, because there are going to be so many plaintiffs, I'm sure everyone's seen the number of structures destroyed, and the structures are a little bit, I'm not going to say off because they're certainly accurate, but when they count structures, they would count a home and a detached garage as being two structures, which certainly they are, but that's obviously one family. And so when you see the number, and I think the number now is close to 8,000 structures that are destroyed, that doesn't mean that 8,000 homes were destroyed. The actual number is going to be a little lower. That said, there are going to be, in all likelihood, 5,000 to 6,000 single-family residences that are destroyed. There are going to be multi-unit residences, apartment buildings, things like that, and then there are commercial structures. So this is going to be a very, very large case. I would anticipate 12, maybe 14,000 separate actions that are going to be brought. And so what we want to do is we want to move that process along. We want to get a trial date and we want to push it so that Edison has to either start trying these cases or get into a mediation process where we start resolving them. So let's talk a little bit about how that works, who can sue and what is recoverable. One of the questions that we get most often is who can sue? For example, is it only a person that owns a home? If you're a renter, is it only the person whose name's on the lease? One very common one is, well, I was renting a room in a friend's house, or I was living with parents or other relatives. I'm not on the lease, I'm not on the deed. Do I have the right to bring a suit? And the answer is absolutely. If you suffered a loss as a result of this fire, then you can bring a suit. So if you were someone who was, for example, an adult child living at home, if you were someone who has a nuclear family and you were taking care of a parent or grandparent, absolutely, both that nuclear family and the parent or grandparent can bring a case as well. Bottom line is, if you suffered a loss, you can bring a claim. And it's not just if you suffered the actual destruction of your home. The soot and ash claims, and those are for people who had to evacuate and then their home was damaged by soot and ash, are also very significant. Now, it's not a contest, so I'm certainly not saying that those are as significant as home losses, but there are some things to really keep in mind when you're talking about soot and ash claims. Number one, this is not campfire smoke. This is not, trees burning. This is not wood that you would buy and put in your fireplace. These are toxic heavy metals that are in this smoke. And the reason for that is there are numerous reasons. One is that anytime you have older buildings, they have asbestos. When that burns, the asbestos gets up into the air, and we all know how damaging asbestos is. There are cars that burn, so you have aluminum. There are lithium batteries that burn. There are all different kinds of things that burn. You have lead, you have arsenic, you name it, it's in this. And the more we learn about this smoke, the more toxic we realize that it is. So again, I'm not saying that if you have smoke damage to your home, you can't go back. That's not the case at all. However, it's important to realize that this can be significant, and it can be particularly significant for people who have respiratory issues, autoimmune issues, or anything like that. One of the most common things that we face are elderly folks who have COPD or other types of issues. And I can't tell you the number of people I've represented who prior to the fire had COPD, but it was largely manageable. They might be, on a tank for part of the day. After the fire, because of the smoke exposure that they had, they went to having to use oxygen full time. That is a very common thing. People with asthma, particularly children, older people, it can be very significant. So the advice that I would give to everyone is, if you have any type of smoke damage in your home, you want to make sure that the home is evaluated. And if you are particularly close to the fire, or if you're someone or your family member is someone who has respiratory issues, who has autoimmune, who has asthma, who has anything like that, it's important to have an industrial hygienist come in and check and make sure that it's safe. This is something that is very common. We can certainly refer you to people, but you want to make sure that you have that test done to make sure that you and your family are safe. So that's kind of an answer as to who can sue. Again, the answer is anyone who was affected by the fire. Yes, ma'am?
Should we join more than one lawsuit? We were recommended of Attorney Whalen. He wanted us to join. Would we join his and yours, or does that matter?
Okay, that's a great question. The question was, should we join more than one lawsuit? And the answer is no. Absolutely not. You only want to join one suit, because what will happen if you join two suits is that, let's say you hired us and you hired somebody else, both of us would file for you. The defense would get notice of that, and they would notify us that you each have the same client and only one of you can represent her. So when that happens, we contact the other attorney, and then both of us would contact the client, and the client would make a selection as to who they wanted to represent them. So it's a great question, and people do that, and I can understand why, but it's important to only hire one attorney. Looks like we have a question here. The question is, how many cases have we litigated against utility companies in fire cases? A couple dozen. I don't have the exact amount. They are on our website. We go through and do every one. Quick overview, the first one we did was in 2007 in San Diego. There were 3 major fires, and we've been doing them all over California. We're very involved in Maui, Oregon, Washington, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado. We do this all over the country. That's why we have a large firm. We have 80 lawyers, we have over 400 people, and the reason for that is it's necessary to be able to handle all these cases to work them up. Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question. Somebody told me that you have the option to join a tort action lawsuit, is that what you call it? Or you could just hire an attorney to individually represent just you. I don't know what the pros and cons, or if that is even a real thing.
Absolutely. So, really good question. The question was individual representation versus more of a class action model. Is that what you were talking about? Okay. So that's a great question, and that's an important thing to look at. In California, class actions are not often used for fires. Some firms tried to use them about 15 years ago. We were opposed to them, and a lot of us were successful in defeating them. Let me give everyone the reasons why I think individual cases are better for this type of litigation than class actions. So class actions are very important, and they're very effective for the types of cases that they were intended to address. With a class action, you need to have 3 things. You need to have similarity of damages, meaning that the damages for every one of the class members are substantially similar, don't have to be identical, but have to be very similar. You have to have a large number of claims, and then the damages have to be small enough that it would not be economically feasible to hire an attorney to address it. So the example I give is Volkswagen emissions cases. I don't know if everybody remembers, but about 5-6 years ago, Volkswagen got caught falsifying the emissions on certain of their vehicles. And because of that, cars that people thought were worth X were actually worth X minus up to about $10,000, depending upon a number of factors. The year, the mileage, that kind of thing. But that's the kind of action that is readily ascertainable in terms of a class action, because what you do is you look at the number of cars sold, and there would have been, say, 1 million Jettas sold. You look at that and you say, okay, if you had a Jetta from 2017 that had 20,000 miles on it, the Blue Book says $20,000, but it's actually now worth 16 because it's not as efficient as they represented it. So you can do the math, you can multiply it, and you can come up with what the appropriate numbers are, and that's exactly what they did. And so they settled those on behalf of several million people for about $2 billion, and everybody got a small amount. And that made perfect sense. That is a good way to handle those kinds of cases. However, it doesn't work in fires because the damages are not substantially similar. You could have soot and ash. You could have renters. Go ahead, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yes, so the question was, when you have someone who has tragically died in the fire, would you file a claim on behalf of the estate? The answer is yes. You file a claim on behalf of the estate, and you can also bring separate claims for all of the heirs. And different heirs have different rights depending upon how closely related they were to the individual. So, yes, sir.
What is your fee structure? My understanding in these cases you charge a contingency fee, so maybe 25% or 30%. And then on top of that, my understanding is they also charge like expenses, like your investigators or whatever. So based on your experience, let's say if you charge 25%, then is the effective rate really for us that we're paying is like 30 or 40% when you add the expenses?
Okay, that's a great question. The question was the fee structure. Let me just finish answering this question and we'll come right back to it. So what we were talking about before was the difference between a class action and an individual mass action case. And with the fires, because there are so many different types of cases, smoke and soot, renter loss, homeowners, all of these kinds of things, you can't just lump them all together, come up with a big number, and then distribute it. That works great for a couple of different groups. One is the defendant, because they're able to immediately know what their full liability is and pay that out. And two, the plaintiff's attorneys who bring the suit, because they get paid off the top and they're very happy, and then a special master will make the allocation and their job's much easier. That's not the way we handle these cases. What we do is work each one of them up individually. And so your claim may be different than your neighbor's. You may have lost a home that you own, and so you're going to have your structure, you're going to have your personal property, you're going to have landscaping, you may have erosion damages depending upon a number of factors, all of those things. Your neighbor, who may have the exact same home, was a renter. So while they are certainly going to have a claim, they're going to have personal property, they're going to have emotional distress, they're going to have all those claims, their claim is going to be very different from yours, and because yours is going to have all these other components, yours is, in all likelihood, going to be a higher value in terms of money than theirs. And so again, the way that we approach these cases is we work each one of them up individually, and we settle each one of them individually. So there's no class settlement where we just get a huge amount of money and then everybody essentially has to fight over it. It's each individual case. This person if they're happy with their amount, can settle, and their neighbor could say, no, I'm not happy with that, I want to move forward, and that's fine. But that's how we do these cases, and that's why I think it's so important to do them as what we call mass torts, which is a number of cases combined together for pretrial purposes, but still resolved individually versus the class action. Getting back to your question, sir. So that was a great question. And the question, in case everyone, some may not have been able to hear in the back, the question was, what is the fee structure, number one? And number two, with costs, what is the actual rates, the real rate that people are going to experience? So I can tell you about our fee structure, and then I can tell you what you usually see in these cases. Typically, in these types of cases, it runs from 25% to 40%. And it's a contingency, meaning that there's no money up front, and the attorney will advance all costs, and they will be paid at the end based upon a percentage. The percentage that we charge is 25%. I haven't seen anybody in this fire charging 40. I have seen it in some others. I know there are some folks that are still at a third, and I'm sure there are people that are below. I don't personally know anybody who is. Most of the people I know are charging 25. And I think for this fire, 25 is reasonable and is where it should be. Initially, our standard is a third, so that's where we were. But when we looked at it, we felt 25 made more sense, so we dropped it down to 25. So that's where it is. Let me get back to you in 1 second. I want to answer the second part of the question. So the second part of the question is, what about costs? So costs are what it costs to work up the entire case, the liability, and then for each individual, there are going to be individual costs. So all of our clients will have two different kinds of costs. One is joint costs, and one are individual costs. Now the joint costs are going to be very, very low for a couple of reasons. One is that in most cases, we have a large number of clients, usually between 1 and 3,000, depending upon the size of the case. And we share all joint costs among our clients on a pro rata basis. And because of that, it's typically less than 1/2 of 1%. And these joint costs are things like depositions, liability experts, things like that, investigators, things that you need. But it's very, very low. It's typically about 1/2 of 1%. In this case, we have put together a group of all of the other individual plaintiffs' attorneys. We had our first call earlier this week, and we're having a recurring call Monday afternoons. And one of the things that we're going to do is have a joint group of liability experts. We always hire our own experts just to make sure that we have them. But what we've said to a number of other firms is, look, rather than have you guys either not have experts or just hire your own individual, you're welcome to come along and join us, use ours, and we can share the costs. So that will further bring down the costs for each of our clients. So I would anticipate that it will be significantly less than that 1/2 of 1%. But that's only part. 1 second, let me just finish this one. This gentleman had a question, and then I will get to you. The other are the individual costs, and those are what is required to work up your damages. If you're a renter, you probably are not going to have much in the way of individual damage costs. You might have had some unusual item that we would have to hire somebody to appraise, so that could be one thing. Or in rare circumstances, you could have had either physical injury or extreme psychological distress such that you needed us to hire a psychologist or psychiatrist to render an opinion. That's very rare, it doesn't usually happen, but it could. So usually renters don't have much, if anything, by way of those individual costs. A homeowner is going to have a number of these costs. One is going to be the contractor, because we have to hire a contractor to give us an estimate as to what it would cost to rebuild what you had. You're probably going to have a landscape, either a landscaper or an arborist, depending upon where your home was. Most people in the immediate Altadena area are going to have landscapers, but there are some, as you get farther out, that have larger trees that may need arborists. So that's a different cost. Some people, particularly the ones that are near the hillside, may need erosion experts. Erosion, it's going to be less of an issue here, but it's often a huge problem in these fires. So what we do is we hire those experts, and we do get a discount because we give them so much business. But those are costs that we advance, and then we recover out of the end. They're usually very low, the costs, typically somewhere in the $5,000 to $10,000 range for all of the experts. So if the fee is 25%, the costs are usually less than 2%. I can't guarantee that because everyone is different, but that's what you're looking at. So you're probably looking at a real, when everything is done, about 27%. That's my best estimate. Yes, sir, you had a question, and then let's go into the back.
Yes, my question is, with the insurance companies, did they deny your claim or reduce it? Do you communicate with that? Do you have cases? Is that part of your firm as well?
Okay, so the question was, if an insurance company denies your claim or doesn't pay you in full, is that something we handle? So fortunately enough, we have an insurance expert here who's going to speak after me, who can talk about it. We do, as part of our firm, a limited amount of those cases, but we felt that in this case, the best way forward would be to hire an expert. Not hire, but to refer the cases to an insurance expert. So Greg is going to talk, once I'm done, about that, and he can let everybody know what services are available for people who believe that their insurance company did not treat them fairly. One thing I do want to address, and I misspoke at the last town hall, and Mr. Dickens fortunately let me know what the actual cost was, but I had quoted for public adjusters between 10 and 20%, just because that's what I'd seen in other fires, but he let me know that in this case, there are public adjusters who are charging less, some of whom are charging 5%, that sort of thing. So he and I are going to speak afterwards, and one of the things that we're going to put on our resource page is a reference to public adjusters who are charging less in case people are interested. And I just want to say we're not suggesting that anyone hire any of the people on our resource page. We're not saying you have to, anything like that. All we're saying is one of the things we want to do is give you as much information as possible. So when we come across a service that our clients may be interested in, if we're able to vet that person and we think they'd be good, then we put them on there. But again, we're not saying by any means that you have to hire anybody on there. Yes, in the back. So that's a great question. And the question was about insurance companies and subrogation. So that's a perfect segue into talking about how that works and how it will work in this particular case. So, yes, ma'am.
The question is that if we file a joint law firm, can someone in our household join separately from my house?
Yes, absolutely. So before we do subrogation, let me just answer this quick one. The question was, if this couple were to file, can someone in their home file a separate suit? And the answer is absolutely. It would just be limited to their losses, not yours. Oh, absolutely. They can hire a different firm. Was that the question? Yes, absolutely. So let's say, for example, that the two of you own your home and you want to hire us. And so you hire us, we represent you, and we go through and document all of your damages. We bring a suit on your behalf. Let's say you have an adult child and that person has a relationship with another attorney or finds another attorney that they want to go with. They have the absolute right to do that, but it would only apply to their damages. So their emotional distress and their personal property is how it works. So answering the question, and again, this is a key one, It's how insurance works in terms of subrogation. And the other key part is what the interplay is in these cases between insurance and the claim that you're going to make. Because while a lot of people have had their insurance canceled, most people do have insurance. It's going to be probably around 80%. So what we are doing in these claims is we are suing for the uninsured portion. And so the way that we determine that is this. If you're a homeowner, you're in all likelihood going to have, it's different if you have Fair Plan, but if you have a standard, you're going to have coverage A, which would cover your structure, coverage B, which would cover your contents, and then coverage C, which would cover outbuildings, landscaping, things like that. You'll also have loss of use, also called ALE, alternate living expenses, depends on the type of policy. So what we do is we have experts who will come in and determine what your total loss is. So with the structure, you're probably going to be underinsured to a certain extent. Usually it's between $100,000 and $300,000 for an average home. So we take that amount, and again, let's just say it's $600,000 for insurance, and the actual cost is going to be $900,000. We take that amount, which is $300,000, and we are suing for that. Now let's go to your personal property. You're probably going to have a shortfall of anywhere between $50,000 to $250,000, depending upon a number of factors. And a lot of people will look at the number, because it will usually be between $300,000 and $500,000, and say, hey, that's going to be plenty for my personal property. And it's a lot of money. But one of the things that I've learned doing this as many times as I have is we accumulate a lot of stuff. And so when you make those lists up, it turns out that I would say 75% of my clients have a gap between what their personal property pays them and what their actual loss is. So that could be another $100,000, so we put that in there. Now you've got the 3, you've got the 1. Let's say with your landscaping, your limit's $50,000, and it's going to cost you $75,000 to re-landscape, put in a new tree, put in new sprinklers, all that kind of stuff. So you've got a $25,000 gap. So you look at that, and that is around $425,000. That's what we are going to be suing for. We're suing for the difference between what your insurance company paid or what the policy limits are, if it looks like you're going to get policy limits, and what you're actually going to need to be made whole. And one of the good things about this type of suit is that because there's a cause of action called inverse condemnation, which is very unusual, it has a fee shifting provision. In most cases, they go under what's called the American rule. And the American rule just means that everybody pays their own attorney fees. But with the fee shifting provision under inverse condemnation, for all your real and personal property damages, the defendant has to contribute a reasonable amount of attorney fees. So what we do is we look at that $425,000, we figure out what the attorney fees are on that, and we put that on top of it. In addition, they have to pay your reasonable cost of suit and prejudgment interest. Now it's a low amount, it's usually between 1% and 2%. It's not what you would actually get, but it is something. We put all that together, and those are the economic damages that we're suing for. But that's only half of it, because the other half are the non-economic damages, and those are very significant. That's everything that you're going through. That is, if you were somebody that had to flee the fire, that emotional distress you experienced. That is losing your home, losing the place that, if it's a family home, a place you used to go to when you were a child. That is losing the cherished possessions, the things that you can never get back, pictures of deceased relatives. An example I give, hang on just 1 second, let me finish this and then I'll come over. One example I give is in my office, I have a picture of my grandmother, and we were very close. I was her first grandson, and she lived near me, and she lived to be 99, so we spent a lot of time together. And if I were to lose my office, I mean, that's really the only thing that I would really want out of it. Everything else can be replaced except for that picture. And that's what we mean by a cherished possession, something that does not have any fair market value or any significant fair market value, but it means a lot to you. Something that your children made you when they were in kindergarten. Those kinds of things, those are cherished possessions. And that all comes under that emotional distress. So all of that is a huge loss, and we're going to sue for that non-economic in addition to the economic. We put all that together, we submit a demand packet, which is supported by, it's basically a spreadsheet, but then it is supported by all of the different reports, a narrative of what you went through, all of those things. That's the workup element. And then we make that demand. Then we'll go to a mediation. They'll come in and they'll say, you're way too high, it should be a fraction of that. We fight back and forth, we get to a number, and then you make the individual decision, do I want to settle for that or do I not? But to your question, and I'm sorry for the long lead up, but I just wanted to make sure we talked about that. To your question, the insurance company can't come back and try and get anything because we've already taken out what they paid you. And the reason we do that, because a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, I paid for my insurance, why is Edison getting the benefit of it? The answer is they're not. Your insurance company, whether you have Farmers or State Farm or Allstate or USAA, Geico, any of those, is going to file their own suit, a subrogation action, and they're going to try and recover what they paid out. In this fire, that would probably be several $billion, and so they're going to be filing that suit, and they're going to be trying to recover that. But the good news is, to go to your question, they cannot now come back after that and try and get any of your money. Yeah. So let me go over here, and then let's go over here. Yes, ma'am. Great question. Okay, so the question was, the day before the fire, you just completed a solar system. So you're obviously entitled to recover for all the value of that solar system. No question at all. One of the things that people ask is, well, how do I prove it? Because a lot of times with the solar system, it should be okay, but for a lot of times people say, well, I had this personal property, but if I did have any receipts, everything was burned. So the way that you do that is it can be your testimony, it can be the testimony of friends, relatives, but the other thing is, I'm not a big fan of social media, but one thing that has helped my practice immensely is that a lot of people take a lot of pictures, and in the background is a lot of stuff. So if you're somebody who uses social media, or if you're like me and you have kids that are always on social media, you can look at those pictures and you can see a lot of things in the background, and it'll show what the inside of your home looked like. So that can be very helpful. Yes, ma'am, I think right here had a question, and then let's come over here. We'll come over there, let's do this right here. Great question. Okay, so the question was, at the beginning we talked about what our investigators saw when they went out and did the inspection of Edison's equipment. So the question was, who ultimately makes the determination of whether or not Edison is at fault? And the answer is there are going to be two separate determinations that are made. The first is going to be by either the Los Angeles County Fire or by CAL FIRE. And they will determine the cause as they believe it, and they'll write a report of investigation. Now, while that is very helpful, and we always look at those, that's not binding in court. That's just, it's like a police report. So, and if you've ever seen a police report, oftentimes they're accurate, but sometimes they're not. And with the same thing here, in all the fires I've investigated, I'd say CAL FIRE's gotten it wrong twice. So, they're over 90%, but it's not always right. And Edison certainly doesn't have to accept their finding as gospel. They can say, nope, we disagree with it. So the ultimate decision in our case will be made by a jury. If we do go to trial, and if Edison doesn't want to settle, then there will be two decisions that will be made. One will be by a jury as to whether or not they believe Edison was negligent. And another will be by the Superior Court judge who's assigned to the case. That judge will decide whether or not they believe Edison is liable in inverse condemnation, because there's a different standard and that determination is made by the Superior Court judge. The good news, though, is that the judge is not making the determination on damages. Inverse condemnation is a two-pronged case. One is the determination of fault, which is made by a judge, then the damages are made by a jury. So either way, we'll get a jury, and the jury will determine what your losses are. I think right here and then right there. Yes?
I have a two-part.
Okay.
First one is the anticipation of settlement. What do you anticipate settlement will come through? And then the second part is why do you use your firm?
Okay, so two good questions, and I want to make sure I got the first part correct. The question was, when do we anticipate a settlement? Yeah. And then the second part is, why should you choose us? Okay, so the answer to the first question is, there's no way of knowing for sure. I can tell you what typically happens, and then we can talk about how we think it's going to happen here. So usually you're looking at 18 to 24 months before settlements begin. And the reason for that is that when you file a lawsuit, the defendant is trying to delay it out. And so the determination, the most important decision that the judge can make is when he or she sets that trial date. Because the trial date really provides a point that a decision has to be made. And so that's why we push so hard to get those trial dates early. I think here, given the fact that this is a case that has an incredible amount of media attention, and it's very important to a lot of people, that the judge is going to move more quickly. I'm optimistic that there will be an earlier trial date, and so I think we may get settlements in this case a little bit earlier. This is optimistic, but I'm trying to push for 12 to 18 months. It would be great if it was before that, but I mean, realistically, the quickest we've ever gotten a settlement was 10 and a half months. That was in a smaller fire. It was dealing with PG&E, and PG&E at the time had a severe image problem. And so they were thinking, if we can start settling these cases early and show that we're a good corporate citizen, it will help us. Plus, it was a much smaller fire. It was $1 billion total, whereas this is going to be much higher, probably $5 to $7 billion, and possibly even higher, depending upon a number of factors. So that's my answer. Is realistically, the average is about 18 to 24 months. We're going to push to make it quicker. So the second question you had, and then we'll come down here. The second question you had was why you should use us. And so I think there's a couple of things that I would say in terms of choosing an attorney. The first thing you want to do is choose the right attorney for your problem. You want to make sure in this case that you have someone who has a lot of experience, not just in fires, but in utility fires. And so, for example, if I were to try to handle a divorce case, I wouldn't know what to do. I've never done that. I mean, I'm sure I could learn, but I don't have any experience with it. Same thing here. You don't want to hire an attorney who doesn't have experience handling these types of cases to represent you. Now, that said, there are a number of attorneys who are very good at this, and I'm certainly not saying we're the only one. Obviously, we think we're very good, but there are other ones. So I think at that point, what you want to do is you want to interview different attorneys, you want to listen to what they say, and you want to find someone that you are comfortable with. One thing that I think is very important is don't be in a hurry. I'm certainly not suggesting that everyone wait until the end of the statute of limitations, which is 2 years for personal injury and emotional distress, and 3 years for property damage. I wouldn't recommend waiting that long, but don't feel like you have to make a decision today, tomorrow, or next week. Take your time, really select and make sure that you are comfortable with the attorney. Do they have the capability of handling these cases? Do they answer your questions? Are they responsive? Those are the things that you're looking for, because there are certainly 4 or 5 firms that do this a lot and are very good, but you want to make sure that you get somebody who you feel comfortable with and you feel like will do a good job representing your individual interests. Just real quick, we had a question. Oh, okay. So we'll come to that in just 1 second. There's a car blocked in. So we're gonna do a public service announcement, please.
Public service announcement. We have a blue Honda Accord 7WVMO35. Again, a blue Honda Accord to my left. On this side is blocking a car in that needs to get out. California license plates 7WVM035. You can please go out and move your car so someone can get out. Thank you.
All right. I'm proud to say that it's not my car, so I'm not the person at fault. Let's go across here, and then we'll come back to this side, because we had some folks that had their hands up. I'm just gonna come around here, then I'll come right back. Yes, ma'am, go ahead, and then we'll come over here. Yes. Yes, okay, great question. So the question was, when you're talking about homeowners insurance, how does the California Fair Plan differ? The answer is that because it is the insurer of last resort, it is not a standard policy. It's going to be more expensive, and the coverage is going to be more limited. So there are versions of the California Fair Plan where people do not have personal contents coverage. There are versions where people do not have coverage for alternate living expenses. It really depends on your current policy, but if you got an average policy from State Farm, any of the major insurers, I can tell you what to expect. With Fair Plan, it's very individual, and unfortunately, you end up paying more for it, and that's just because of the nature of it. Oh, absolutely. So the question was, do we still represent people who have Fair Plan? Absolutely. We represent people that have all different kinds of insurance and no insurance. We always have a significant number of folks who unfortunately are uninsured, and that's for a number of reasons. One of which being, as I'm sure everybody's familiar, insurance companies have been very aggressive about canceling and non-renewing policies. Let's go right here and then we'll come over there. I'm sorry, let me do this right here and then we'll come to you. Go ahead, yes ma'am. Great question. So the question is, if you have an antique, and how that is handled different from a regular piece of property. So the standard when you're dealing with personal property, and this could be an antique, this could be a sofa, a TV, a car, any type of personal property, the standard is fair market value. So as a result, if you have an antique, you could have something that is worth much more than what you paid for it. What you are entitled to recover is the fair market value for that antique. So if you bought it and it was, $2,000, but now it's worth 10, you are entitled to recover $10,000 for that. Yes, ma'am. Oh, an heirloom? Okay, so that's a really good question. So for heirlooms, there's two components to that. One is you're entitled to recover the fair market value, but at the same time, that is a type of cherished possession. For example, if you had a ring that was passed down in your family, that obviously has a fair market value. So it wouldn't be like the picture I have of my grandma, where the only person who's interested in that is me and my sisters, but just mainly us. Doesn't have a fair market value. Whereas a ring or something like that, an antique, is going to. It's an heirloom. So you take the fair market value, and then on top of that, you make a non-economic damage claim because it has sentimental value that is over and above what a typical piece of furniture would. Let's come over here. Striped shirt, and then right behind. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah, absolutely, that's a great question. So, one of the things about this fire that was so tragic, and I'm sure everyone's read the articles, I know it was in the New York Times, LA Times, and I think there's also been some news coverage on it. But as most folks know, there was a problem with notifying people who were west of Lake. And I actually drove up Lake today and looked at both sides, and you can certainly see the damage. So the issue is whether or not there's an additional source of liability. So let me answer it this way. The first liability and the entity that is liable no matter what is Edison. Edison started the fire, and so whether or not there was an issue in terms of notifying people, Edison is still 100% responsible. But that doesn't address the very real concern about whether or not there were serious mistakes made, and if there were some mistakes made, whether this was a negligence issue of, for example, the folks who made the determination looking at it saying the fire's never going to get west of Lake, so we're not going to send out preliminary notices, or if there was something more nefarious going on. And this is actually something that I was looking at and thinking about earlier today, because it would be nice if we lived in a country where we didn't have to worry about that. But that is not the case. And certainly historically, there have been incredible amounts of systemic racism where it's possible to look at this and say, I wonder if this was deliberate. My message to people would be this. This is absolutely something where we need to have a very thorough investigation. I know President Johnson has called for one, and this is something where we have to look at it and we have to find out what happened. For what it's worth, I personally don't think it makes sense to jump to those conclusions until we have more evidence. So I think what we have to do is do an investigation and look at it and see why these determinations were made. One thing I can say, and this is having handled a lot of these fires, this is unfortunately not the first time where there were breakdowns in the warning system, and those breakdowns had fatal consequences. In the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa, which is a predominantly white, very upper middle class community, there was a complete failure. I mean, it was catastrophic, and they did not let people know. As a result, over 20 people died. And there's no doubt in my mind that was negligence. That wasn't a situation where they wanted those people to die or any other nefarious thing. They just made a mistake. In Maui, there was a severe failure to notify people, and you had people, white, every ethnicity you can imagine died in the Lahaina fire. There were 102 people that were killed, and frankly, I think there were more, but because of the nature of the damages, there are still people that are unaccounted for that I don't think we'll ever find because of just how horrific that was. So while it is a serious issue, while we need to look at it, and while we certainly live, unfortunately, in a place that has systemic racism, we can't jump to that conclusion now. We need to look at it, and it needs to be something that we figure out as we move forward. So I hope that answered the question. Absolutely. Let's go here, and then we'll come back around. I know there's a bunch of folks on this side that have questions. You're next, I promise. Go ahead. Great question. So the question was, do we provide support for people that are undocumented? Absolutely. You are entitled to bring a claim regardless of your immigration status. The only difference is you can't make a claim for lost wages in the United States if you do not have the right to work here because you don't have any reasonable expectation of future employment. So you can certainly make a claim for past lost wages, you could make a claim for emotional distress. If you owned your house, you could make a claim for that. If you were a renter, you could make a claim for that. You just are prevented from making a claim for future lost wages. We also have Spanish speakers, so we can help anyone. And in these fires, particularly in some of the more rural areas, we've represented a lot of folks who were undocumented migrant workers, and that's something we have a lot of experience with. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, one is like I have California here, and one is I noticed that it said not included for cost to rebuild. It said that, and I said, what? So, and the cost to rebuild is much more expensive than what I thought it was, and the amount that they're giving me, I know it's different. It's a large amount in there. And then also in rebuilding, you know, we want to make sure as a community this never happens again. So is there some way to include the cost to rebuild with fire, like abatement costs, so that we never have to experience this kind of devastating trauma? This has been traumatizing for us, and they're the reason why this happened.
Yeah. Okay, so several questions there. Let me answer them one by one. So the first question is, there's an issue on your policy as to how much you're entitled to. So let me suggest this. One of the things that we do, one of the resources we provide, is we have a retired insurance adjuster. Introduced him at the last town hall. His name is Joel Alba. This is absolutely free. It does not cost you anything. You can call Joel. You can send him your policy. He'll look at it and he'll say, okay, under the terms of your policy, they owe you X. And he can answer that question. He can answer any other questions you have about your policy. And this is something I encourage people to do. We do this for a reason. We make Joel available, and he really does a good job. He spent over 3 decades in the industry before he retired. We've been using him since the 2017 fires, and he's helped a lot of our clients. And so I think he can help you with that. So I encourage, if you need the information, let me know and I'll do it. Hang on just 1 second, let me finish this.
I do in a lot.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and so that's on our website. You can also call. You can email us, and you can just let us know, I'd like to get Joel's information. We will pass it along. He's very accessible, and you can reach out to him. So the next question was, it sounded like you were saying they're giving. Go ahead.
What it is the material that we rebuild with is fire retardant, because there's homes that didn't burn, and then there's homes that burned down right next to it. And how do I want